The shocking reason you can't remember your dreams. Hello everyone, and welcome to Zen Buddhism Wisdom, your space for deep spiritual exploration and timeless Buddhist teachings. Have you ever woken up with a lingering feeling, a sense that you just experienced something profound, only to have it slip away like sand through your fingers? Perhaps you glimpsed another time, another place, or even another life. Yet within moments, the memory dissolved, leaving only a faint echo. What if I told you that this isn't just random forgetfulness, but something far more mysterious? Buddhist teachings reveal that dreams are more than just the mind's nightly wanderings. They are windows into hidden truths, past karma, and even the astral dimensions beyond this physical existence. However, there are powerful forces at play that prevent us from remembering them. Whether it's the ego shielding us from unsettling revelations, emotional and energetic blockages clouding our awareness, or karmic ties shaping the very fabric of our dream world, the reasons behind dream amnesia run deeper than you might imagine. In today's video, we'll uncover the Buddhist wisdom on dreams, why they vanish, what they reveal about your spiritual path, and most importantly, how you can train your mind to unlock their secrets. By the end of this journey, you'll see your dreams in an entirely new light. Before we begin, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Zen Buddhism Wisdom, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss powerful insights on Buddhist teachings and spiritual awakening. Now, are you ready to dive into the hidden world of dreams? Let's begin. In Buddhist traditions, dreams are often seen as more than just random brain activity. They hold profound meaning and purpose. Unlike the modern scientific view, which largely attributes dreams to neural processes and subconscious reflections of waking experiences, Buddhism offers a more spiritual interpretation. The Buddha himself discussed different types of dreams, distinguishing between those influenced by daily thoughts, those carrying spiritual messages, and those reflecting deeper karmic imprints. If dreams are windows into hidden aspects of our consciousness, then why do we often forget them? What prevents us from accessing their wisdom, and how can we harness them for spiritual growth? The answer lies within the intricate nature of consciousness itself. Our minds are conditioned by countless layers of perception, memory, and karma, creating barriers that obscure our ability to recall or understand dreams. Some dreams are so profound that the rational mind suppresses them, fearing their implications. Others remain buried under emotional turmoil or unresolved past life karma, waiting for the right conditions to surface. Buddhist teachings suggest that by refining our awareness and purifying our thoughts, we can unlock these hidden messages and gain deeper insight into our spiritual path. The human ego, often perceived as the architect of our waking reality, serves as a silent sentinel guarding the boundaries of our perceived self. It functions as an intricate filtration system, meticulously sifting through experiences to preserve a coherent and stable identity. This extends beyond our waking hours, shaping the way we engage with our dreams. When confronted with dreamscapes that defy the logic of our conditioned understanding, visions of past incarnations, ethereal encounters, or glimpses into dimensions beyond the physical realm, the ego instinctively tightens its grip, shielding us from what it perceives as destabilizing revelations. Such dreams carry immense spiritual weight, hinting at realities far vaster than the one we consciously navigate. Yet, the ego, bound to the illusion of separateness, often deems these experiences too disorienting for the conscious mind to process. As a result, Rather than allowing us full access to these profound insights, it distorts, fragments, or buries them beneath layers of forgetfulness. What remains upon waking is often a mere whisper of something greater, a fleeting impression, a vague sensation, or an elusive déjà vu. This built-in safeguard is not a defect but a necessary adaptation. Imagine waking from sleep each morning with an unfiltered flood of memories spanning multiple lifetimes, parallel existences, or celestial realms. Such an onslaught could fracture the psyche, making it difficult to distinguish between the mundane and the mystical, the tangible and the intangible. The mind, in its infinite wisdom, grants access only to what aligns with our present level of consciousness, releasing truths at a pace we are capable of integrating. Interestingly, those who engage in deep meditation or sustained spiritual practice often report temporary access to these hidden dimensions of the dream world. Yet, upon returning to ordinary consciousness, these experiences slip through the fingers of memory like grains of sand. This phenomenon suggests that while the mind is capable of perceiving profound realities, it remains bound by an internal threshold, one that only dissolves when consciousness is sufficiently refined to withstand the weight of deeper truths. To transcend this barrier, one must cultivate a heightened state of awareness, loosening the ego's grip without shattering the foundation of the self. Through mindful introspection, dream journaling, and disciplined meditative practice, seekers can gradually train the mind to retain and integrate the wisdom concealed within the dream realm. For those willing to embark on this path, the reward is nothing short of transformative, an awakening to the vast, interconnected nature of existence itself. Beyond the intricate workings of the subconscious, a far more elusive force governs our ability to remember and interpret dreams, our emotional and energetic state. The mind, like a vast and delicate instrument, is constantly attuned to the frequencies of our inner world. Yet, when burdened by unresolved emotions, lingering fears, and the weight of unprocessed experiences, this instrument falls out of harmony, disrupting the clarity of our dream perceptions. Stress, anxiety, and emotional attachments function like a thick fog, obscuring the delicate messages that dreams attempt to convey. Every restless thought, every lingering regret, and every suppressed trauma generates discordant vibrations within the psyche, drowning out the whispers of the subconscious. It is akin to trying to hear a soft, celestial melody while standing amid the deafening clamor of a thunderous storm. No matter how profound or illuminating a dream may be, its essence dissolves upon waking, lost beneath the static of our waking concerns. From a Buddhist perspective, the mind is like a still pond. When undisturbed, it reflects reality with perfect clarity. Yet, when turbulent, its surface distorts the reflections, making it nearly impossible to perceive what lies beneath. This is why meditation is revered as an essential practice for unlocking the wisdom of dreams. Through disciplined stillness, the restless tides of the mind begin to settle, allowing deeper truths to emerge from the subconscious without interference. Seasoned monks and spiritual practitioners who have mastered the art of mindfulness often speak of dreams that transcend the ordinary, visions of past lives, encounters with enlightened beings, or prophetic insights that unfold with startling lucidity. These experiences are not mere chance occurrences but the natural byproduct of an undisturbed, finely attuned consciousness. By cultivating inner serenity and shedding the emotional burdens that cloud our perception, we open the gates to a realm where dreams no longer fade upon waking, but instead, become luminous signposts guiding us toward profound self-discovery. To access this level of dream clarity, one must treat emotional and energetic purification as a sacred practice. This means engaging in mindful release, letting go of grudges, dissolving attachments, and allowing emotions to flow rather than fester. When the heart is unburdened and the mind is still, the messages from our dreams emerge not as distant echoes but as vivid, illuminating truths, waiting to be embraced. In the vast and intricate tapestry of existence, karma does not merely dictate the course of our waking lives, it silently weaves itself into the very fabric of our dreams. Each night, as consciousness drifts beyond the confines of the physical world, the impressions of past actions, both seen and unseen, rise to the surface like ink spreading through water. Some dreams arrive as gentle whispers, fleeting and enigmatic, while others unfold with haunting intensity, carrying the weight of unresolved karmic imprints. Have you ever found yourself wandering through an ancient city you have never visited, yet somehow recognize every winding street? Have you spoken in a language unknown to your waking mind, only to feel its syllables resonate with eerie familiarity? These are not mere illusions of the subconscious but echoes of previous incarnations, surfacing when the mind is most receptive to the unseen. In Buddhist thought, dreams serve as portals, granting glimpses into the karmic web that extends beyond this lifetime. Some dreams manifest as recurring visions, symbols etched into the soul, demanding resolution. A person plagued by relentless nightmares of drowning may unknowingly be reliving a past life tragedy, their spirit seeking closure from an unfinished chapter of existence. Others might dream of faces they have never encountered in this life, yet feel an inexplicable connection to. As though drawn together by unseen threads of destiny. While modern psychology often attributes such experiences to the subconscious mind's creative process, Buddhism offers a more profound interpretation. These are karmic reverberations, surfacing in the liminal space between lifetimes. This karmic influence also explains why dream recall varies so dramatically from person to person. Those whose past actions have cultivated clarity, wisdom, and mindfulness tend to experience dreams with vivid intensity, as though peering through a crystal-clear window into the unseen realms. In contrast, those burdened by unresolved karma may struggle to remember their dreams at all, their subconscious clouded by the weight of unprocessed energies. Yet, the karmic barriers to dream recall are not insurmountable. Buddhist practices provide tools to purify the mind and dissolve these blockages. Mantra chanting, for instance, serves as a vibrational key, harmonizing one's spiritual frequency to access deeper layers of consciousness. Ritual purification, such as water offerings or fire ceremonies, is believed to cleanse lingering karmic residues, allowing for greater clarity in both waking and dreaming states. Above all, mindful living, an existence rooted in compassion, wisdom, and self-awareness, gradually lifts the veil, revealing the deeper truths encoded within our dreams. For those seeking to unlock the karmic messages hidden in their dreams, the path lies in stillness, self-inquiry, and spiritual refinement. When the mind is quiet, the spirit awakened, and the karmic burdens lightened, dreams no longer serve as fleeting shadows but as luminous guides, illuminating the soul's journey across lifetimes. Throughout history, Buddhist masters have emphasized the profound link between inner tranquility and dream clarity. One such tale, often attributed to Zen and Tibetan traditions, recounts the struggle of a young monk who, despite years of disciplined meditation, found his dreams slipping through his fingers like grains of sand. Every morning, he awoke with a lingering sense that his sleep had been filled with visions of great significance, yet they faded before he could grasp their meaning. Desperate for an answer, he sought the wisdom of his master, an enlightened sage known for his profound understanding of both the waking and dreaming worlds. After a long moment of silence, the master spoke. "Your dreams are like a delicate lotus floating on a still pond. When the waters of the mind are disturbed by ripples of thought and emotion, the image of the lotus shatters. Only when the water is perfectly still does the reflection become whole and clear." Taking these words to heart, the young monk redirected his focus. Rather than chasing after memories of dreams, he immersed himself in even deeper states of meditation, refining his awareness with unwavering patience. Days turned into months, and months into years. Slowly, a shift occurred. His mind, once restless and grasping, became as still as a temple at dawn. Then, the transformation began. He no longer awoke with a vague sense of lost dreams. Instead, his sleep became a sacred space of revelation. Vivid teachings unfolded in his unconscious mind, mystical symbols, celestial visions, encounters with enlightened beings. His past lives appeared to him not as hazy fragments but as living, breathing realities, each carrying lessons that rippled into his present existence. This tale is not merely symbolic, it finds echoes in real-life accounts of Buddhist masters. The great Tibetan yogi Milarepa, for instance, was said to have received teachings from his guru, Marpa, even while asleep. His dreams became an extension of his waking practice, revealing insights that guided his spiritual journey. Similarly, the sixth Zen patriarch, Huineng, recounted that in his moments of deepest stillness, his dreams were filled with enlightenment, not in words, but in direct, undeniable experience. The lesson is clear: dream recall is not an act of forceful remembering, but a natural byproduct of an undisturbed mind. When the inner waters settle, they do not merely reflect dreams, they reveal the boundless ocean of wisdom that has always been there, waiting beneath the surface. Astral projection is not merely a dream but a profound journey where consciousness breaks free from the physical body and ventures into realms beyond ordinary perception. Throughout Buddhist and spiritual traditions, numerous accounts describe individuals who, during sleep or deep meditation, find themselves floating effortlessly beyond their bodies, soaring through landscapes unknown, or standing face to face with enlightened beings. One of the most astonishing historical cases comes from the life of Padmasambhava, the legendary Buddhist master who brought Vajrayana Buddhism to Tibet in the 8th century. It is said that he frequently practiced dream yoga, a technique designed to cultivate awareness during sleep, allowing him to traverse celestial realms and receive teachings from enlightened beings. His astral journeys were not mere visions but profound encounters that guided his mission to establish Buddhism in Tibet. Some texts even claim that he could enter deep states of samadhi, leave his body, and appear in multiple locations simultaneously, a phenomenon known as bilocation, which has been reported by other advanced Buddhist practitioners as well. Modern-day Tibetan lamas also recount experiences of lucid astral travel. The revered 16th Karmapa, Rangyung Rigpa Dorje, was known for describing vivid journeys beyond the material plane. His disciples claim he could leave his physical form at will, traveling to distant lands and even higher spiritual dimensions, gaining wisdom that shaped his teachings. Accounts of astral travel often include sensations of weightlessness, the ability to look down upon one's own sleeping form, and the experience of soaring to distant places, sometimes visiting lands never seen before or even realms beyond the physical world. Many also report encounters with spiritual guides, enlightened beings, or ancestors offering wisdom, as well as receiving profound insights that linger upon waking, feeling more real than daily experiences. Yet, if these experiences are real, why do so few remember them? Buddhist philosophy suggests that our attachment to the material world acts as a gravitational force, pulling us back into the confines of ordinary perception. Upon waking, the rational mind takes over, dismissing the experience as fantasy, and the memory dissolves like mist under the morning sun. Just as enlightenment is obscured by mental distractions, so too are astral journeys veiled by the limitations of our conditioned consciousness. For those who wish to unlock the secrets of astral projection, Buddhist teachings offer a path. Through meditation, dream yoga, and unwavering mindfulness, one can train the mind to remain aware even in the deepest states of sleep, transforming dreams into gateways to higher dimensions. Unlocking the hidden wisdom of dreams requires more than passive observation, it demands active cultivation. Ancient Buddhist masters, yogis, and mystics have long understood that dreams are not mere byproducts of the mind but gateways to deeper knowledge, past life memories, and even higher spiritual realms. To access their full potential, one must train the mind with discipline and intent. One of the most powerful techniques, practiced by Tibetan monks for centuries, is sleep meditation, also known as dream yoga. Unlike conventional meditation, which focuses on stillness while awake, this practice involves maintaining awareness as one transitions from wakefulness to sleep. The 14th century Tibetan yogi Milarepa was said to have mastered this technique, using it to enter lucid dream states where he received divine teachings from celestial beings. His profound ability to control his dreamscape was not a mere novelty but a testament to the mind's ability to transcend the illusions of both waking and dreaming life. A simple yet effective way to begin harnessing dream power is through pre-sleep meditation. Setting a clear intention before sleep, such as silently affirming, "Tonight, I will remember my dreams," acts as a bridge between conscious and subconscious awareness. This practice has roots in the teachings of Buddhist dream yogis who emphasize the importance of mindful intention in shaping dream experiences. Equally crucial is dream journaling, a method used by monks and spiritual seekers to sharpen dream recall. Even the smallest fragments should be recorded upon waking, as doing so strengthens the brain's ability to retain dream content over time. This practice mirrors an ancient Buddhist belief that treating dreams as sacred messages naturally increases one's ability to access their insights. Spiritual tools also play a vital role. The use of sacred crystals, such as amethyst and clear quartz, has been prevalent in both Buddhist and Hindu traditions. These stones are believed to amplify spiritual awareness and aid in dream clarity. Similarly, burning sandalwood incense before sleep creates a meditative atmosphere, inviting deeper dream exploration. Tibetan monks have long used such elements in their nightly rituals, believing that the right environment fosters vivid and meaningful dream experiences. For those seeking even greater mastery, mantras and affirmations provide a direct path to lucid dreaming and heightened dream recall. The sacred mantra Om Mani Padme Hum, often chanted before sleep, is believed to align one's consciousness with higher states of being, paving the way for profound dream visions. Finally, the art of lucid dreaming, where one becomes aware of the dream while still inside it, is a skill cultivated in Buddhist dream yoga for spiritual awakening. Ancient masters encouraged practitioners to perform reality checks, such as looking at their hands or questioning, "Am I dreaming?" This technique, once mastered, allows one to navigate dream worlds with full awareness, uncovering hidden truths and even resolving past karmic imprints. From Milarepa's dream wanderings to the meditative disciplines of modern-day Tibetan monks, the path to unlocking the mysteries of dreams is well-trodden. With dedication and practice, anyone can transform sleep from a passive state into a portal of enlightenment. Imagine waking up one morning, remembering every detail of a dream that felt more real than waking life, an ancient temple, a conversation with a long-lost soul, a glimpse into a past life. What if you realized that these weren't just illusions, but messages waiting to be understood? Your dreams are not meaningless flickers of imagination. They are the whispers of your subconscious, the echoes of karma, and the bridges to unseen realms. The fact that you forget them isn't mere chance, it's a call to deepen your awareness, to refine your mind, and to unlock the wisdom hidden within. Through meditation, dream journaling, and conscious intention, you can reclaim this lost knowledge and reconnect with the unseen dimensions of your existence. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had a dream so vivid, so profound, that it felt like something more? Share your experience in the comments below. If you're intrigued by the connections between dreams, karma, and Buddhist wisdom, don't forget to subscribe to Zen Buddhism Wisdom and turn on notifications. We're building a community of spiritual seekers, uncovering ancient truths and unlocking the secrets of the mind. Your journey into the depths of consciousness is only just beginning. The next time you dream, pay attention, because what you remember might change everything.